Welcome to What Grows. It's a podcast where we play with the connection between who we are and how we grow. I'm your host, Noella Mashi. So, Brandon, we met while you were beta testing an assessment for your company, The Genius of You. And during that, our conversation touched on a range of things, including the undervalued genius of being intuitive, how to productize my strategy consulting practice, and even a little bit on the Enneagram. You explore frameworks for career transitions, relationships, and personal growth in a way that is very practical. Over your career, you've built tools, run experiments, and shared insights that help people understand themselves better. And so I'm really happy to have you here because you don't just think about ideas, you live them.
Yeah,
So welcome.
thanks for having.
So Brandon, if you could give your life a title, like it was a book, what would it be?
Oh, that is a really good question. I'm My current draft would be, I would call it the never-ending experiment. Yeah, that's what I got.
Okay, never ending. You've transitioned careers and sectors, like major changes, multiple times. How many times has it been over your
I've been
career?
basically made five different career shifts. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious, what are you looking for?
What am I looking for? I think the litmus test is, do I feel engaged and excited about what I'm doing? I think that's one layer of it. And then I think another layer is probably, do I actually care about this? Is this actually philosophically important to me? Um, I think that probably informs the feeling of excitedness. And if I were to expand on some of the things that are actually important to me, is, yeah, am I having a meaningful impact in the work that I'm doing? Is it solving a meaningful problem for people that in a way that I care about? And is the work in of itself leveraging the skills or capacities that I have in a meaningful way? So none of that is associated with a very specific industry or problem or role, and that's intentional, or like that's just how my career has played out. I'm also a generalist, so I kind of have different hats, but yeah.
Yeah. Um, Another thing I think about when I think about the never ending experiment, there's questions behind that, right? Like if you have an experiment, you have a hypothesis, like what are the questions that kind of niggle at you, the ones that you don't let go of when you think about, well, career, but it could also be about life because I know you've done some life experiments too.
I think on a macro level, the questions are forever emergent. Like, I will have new questions when I come across new information, when I put it in a new situation, or like with the current advent of AI, there's now a bunch of questions that are associated with that, with how will our entire society navigate this massive flux and change and transition? What is my role in that? And how do I want to show up in that? And how do I make that transition less painful? Because likely will be very painful for a lot of people. How do I protect myself in that? So those are some examples of questions in an emergent environment. Um, but what we could do is we can go through all the transitions that have gone through so far, and what were the questions that I had during those phases. Like during my first career of being in nonprofit, working with churches and the homeless and hospitals, the main question was, how do I wake up excited and feel like my work, it means something? It was very, that's all it was. I don't think I had anything beyond that. The question after that, when I transitioned from that to real estate, the question was, how can I learn how to do business better? How can I be more strategic? How can I be more effective and organized? And how do I understand money? How can I learn about money? Because I realized in my previous career that oh, I don't have the answers to any of these questions. So I feel like my impact is forever capped and limited without the answers to these questions. Once I spent 4 years in real estate, the question became, okay, how do I merge the intersection of wanting to do something meaningful with business and strategy? And so that became the open question. And then I ended up running an education company, which is kind of the intersection of doing something impactful, but trying to create a business out of it. Um, and um, and then after we shut that company down, questions became like, what is my relationship with being a founder, and what is my relationship with being in the 9 to 5 working world? Because prior to that, I had this judgment of, oh, people who work at 9 to 5s, they're boring and not directed, not self-directed, and like they just don't have the like unconventional thinking to like start their own thing. I was like very narrow-minded perspective around people who had jobs because that was the internal thing that I had not reconciled with myself and had a lot of judgments. Um, and I had to work through those because I was about to get a 9 to 5 job. And I'm like, how can I have those judgments when I'm about to be that person myself? Maybe I'm missing some nuance here. Um, so those were some questions. And then I eventually joined uh, I joined an HR tech startup as employee number one. And maybe more philosophical questions around that was, how does being employed shift my own personal identity around being a founder, my identity as a founder? Because now I'm employee number one. I'm no longer the founder. Um, so those were all kind of ongoing questions that I had. And then now with Genius of You, some of the questions are, yeah, can I create a world in which people can enjoy what they do, both in a life and work context? Can I do that effectively? Can I do that at scale? And what does that look like? And can I solo run a company successfully? Because I've co-founded a lot of things before, and this would be my first true venture of doing it all solo. And the statistical odds of solo founders are actually not that high. Um, so there's some kind of a personal exploration of like, what am I capable of in doing this myself, and what happens if it fails? Yeah, but maybe more macro ones in terms of other questions that I think about is like, how do I navigate reinvention uh, more predictably? Um, how do I how do I distill the lessons of reinvention more effectively for other people so they don't have to relearn the same lessons? What are generalizable truths about reinvention? And then how does that all collide with the advent of AI? Yeah. So those are a bunch of questions.
Something that kept coming up for me is this concept of shiny eyes. My very first boss out of university, he used to say, you got to have shiny eyes for the things that you do, and you got to just
Hmm.
come alive
Hmm.
when you think about them. And that's how you know that you're going to do them well. And there was a little while there where I lost my shiny eyes. I
Hmm.
worked in kind of the social impact space for a while, but even there was some time, and then I met just like at a bar at a party this one woman who was talking about aerospace engineering because that happened to be what she was studying. And she's like, everyone thinks I'm like this big genius because I'm studying aerospace engineering, but I'm really average compared to the rest of my class. But I show up every day and feel so privileged that I get to do this because I dreamed about space from when I was like a little girl. And so it doesn't matter to me whether or not I'm the best, but it really does matter to me that I get to do my best here.
Hmm.
And that just kind of reawakened something in me. And when I think about reinvention, and you wrote a post about this actually that I read. When I think about reinvention, I think it happens less frequently than we say it does, if that makes sense. Because you wrote a post about, if you think of yourself as an educator as opposed to I am someone who happens to teach, or you think of yourself as a coder as opposed to I am someone that happens to know code, it becomes very difficult to disentangle yourself from your job in such a way that you can look with an open mind and with
Mhm.
shiny eyes at the next thing.
Mhm.
I spent the past 12 years helping people grow their businesses, whether it's launching, whether it's scaling, whether it's pivoting. I would meet people who had really incredible dreams and just how do you bridge that, from imagination to, to implementation. And that was really fun for me. And then when I thought about starting my own business, I have been pretty good at putting this is what I need to do down on paper. But because I was so focused on what needs to be done and how can this lead to financial freedom, for a little while I forgot the shiny eyes piece.
Mhm.
And so just like how, yeah, what role does personal interest and what makes you come alive play in the decisions that you make?
Like I yeah, I think there are moments where the like childlike excitement in just the craft in of itself of getting good at a thing. Um, I think that was there for all the transitions that I've had at a certain point, and then at a certain point, it no longer was there. And so I think that's a very idealized approach of like, I need to have that feeling for the entirety of a transition. And if I don't have that feeling, something is wrong. Um, I would like if that was true, but I don't, that hasn't been my experience. And I think what's been more true is that every reinvention has an arc. So it begins with that discovery phase, and once you realize that this thing is aligned, then there is that shiny-eyed perspective. There's a lot of hope, there's a lot of optimism, there's a lot of excitement. And then it transitions eventually into, oh no, there are like a lot of real meaningful challenges and problems to be solved while you navigate this. And it yeah, it collides with that older feeling of shiny eyes. And I think that's a normal part of it. Um, and so I think it's in those moments you have to, or at least I've had to pull myself back to remember, oh, why did I get into this in the first place? Like, what was motivating me, and what was the original hook? And reminding myself of the original mission or vision or intention. And so long as that is more clear, it's easier to work through that. And yeah, I think running companies especially, or building a company especially, is really hard. And so I noticed that the times in which it felt the deepest or darkest or most hopeless, it was when the problems went beyond my pay grade, went beyond my level of experience, my level of practice. And so that's when I would feel the most discouraged. And the way you work through that is you have to get better in terms of competence. And when there is clarity, it's easy to be excited. When there's clarity around what to do in the path, there's a lot of excitement. It's easier to get back to that original state of shiny eyes because you're not as focused on, oh, what is the current roadblock that we need to problem solve around. Um, So yeah, I experienced that even with Genius of You. I've been working on this full time for 3.5 years now, and I think the first 6 months were very optimistic and fun, and then there was like a year patch where it felt very fuzzy, and I got really discouraged, and I actually had to take like a 2, 3 month break to give myself space to reorient to what I actually wanted and how I was relating to it because I was feeling a little burnt out. And then, but yeah, maybe the last 9 months, actually, I feel like I've gotten back to the original excitement and purity of the experience, and it's been a lot more fun. Um, so yeah, if you develop the competence or skill set to work through this, and it becomes clear again, then yeah, you can probably revisit it or get back to that old feeling. And of course, there's a lot of variables that contributes to whether you feel like you can tackle the current situation or not. And I think one of them being, do you have external guidance? Do you have tools in front of you to be able to help yourself level up? Um, mentors is nice. Mentors would be nice. Having peers who have faced similar challenges would be nice. But yeah, not everyone has that. So um, yeah,
Yeah. I
long-winded
was
answer.
and I love
Yeah,
long-winded answers. Those are my
yeah.
favorite. So, yeah, again, so much to think about. And I was thinking about community when you were talking because that's the thing with solopreneurs is the absence of that just
Hmm.
someone to say, "Hey, you're not crazy. This is actually really good," or "It's okay, I got you. We're worried together about this." Um, so I'm wondering what happened in the 2 to 3 month break that reignited your interest in what you do?
Um, I think yeah. So basically, what had happened was I wasn't, as I have already described, like I basically reached a point where I wasn't sure what to do next. Um, and it was basically I didn't have a developer to basically start creating the foundation of the website that um, to basically make it easier for people to take the assessment. That was missing. And I, yeah, for whatever reason, now looking back, it feels really trivial or silly. Um, because it's very clear to me how I would approach it now. Um, but yeah, basically, I was beating my head, banging my head on a wall, trying to figure that out. And yeah, it was actually partly because I got introduced to someone that could basically solve that problem for me relatively quickly. And basically, it was a developer team that built out the Genius of You site as it currently stands. And the guy was very philosophically aligned with the whole Genius of You concept. And so yeah, they were willing to handhold me a little bit more than most clients. And yeah, they built out what it is now and it looks a lot sexier than the version that was there a year ago.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that believes that if you want something and you put yourself out there, then your universe does kind of rise up to meet you. So
Hmm.
I'm glad that happened for you.
Yeah.
Um, what you said also makes me think about um, AI, which you've mentioned a couple of times now, but AI in relation to the limits of our personal capacity and capability. I think about this for myself quite a bit. Just, I do believe that, yes, the future of work is entrepreneurship, at least in my circles, because all of a sudden, little old me can do a podcast and write lots of like long reports and build strategy decks really quickly based off of, yes, my experience and my understanding of what is quality content versus not, but definitely could never do it this fast. And there's more and more every day. I started following one of your newsletters, Behind on AI. Just was curious about that. I think that's a fantastic value add for whoever's listening. Just you and some friends or colleagues just sit down for a little bit and play with whatever tools are around and share insights so that other people can get on board. And the newsletter I read, you had just tried out Bordy, which is kind of
Hmm.
a super connector AI that I then had a call with and said, "Hey, I'm looking to talk to someone who can teach me about X and Y," and waiting to hear the results. But that's really exciting. And again, I'm like a suburban mom in Massachusetts, and all of a sudden I have international reach and the ability to do things that I just never could have done.
Yeah. Hmm.
You know, 5, 7 years ago, whatever. And so limits of capacity, I feel like that's being differently defined. I mean, how would you define that?
Oh, that's such a good question. So I ran an experiment maybe 2 months ago that is still ongoing. And basically, it was a commitment that anytime I feel stuck, I literally just talk to ChatGPT, whether it's business or life or anything, and and just running with that. And I think the feeling of being blocked like that internal sense of hesitation. There's a challenge. You don't immediately know the answer to how to solve that challenge. And there's, at least for me, there's a part of me that's just like, oh, I don't want to face this right now. And I want to ignore it. I want to look away and I want to not think about it because I can't see the answer. And so the experiment is every single time I encounter that, just throw the prompt into ChatGPT. This is my situation. I'm lost right now as to how to approach this. And it's not so much necessarily like implementing every answer that the GPT provides, but it's to get inspiration because ChatGPT is really great at giving you ideas. Not all the ideas are always like implementable on the spot. Sometimes they are, but it's just to keep the forward motion going when you as a human might get stuck. Um, so when it comes to capacity, that's one layer of capacity where I feel like people who know how to prompt engineer or use AI as this resource to do uncap yourself in this way, it massively multiplies your capacity. Um, and as AI develops to start being able to do more things in the real world, like operator or Manus or AI agents, uh, I think, yeah, that massively multiplies capacity. So I think that's one layer of just like, can you get things done and how often do you get slowed or blocked by real challenges? That's one aspect. And then I think there's the other real aspect of negative self-talk or just self-limiting beliefs that one has. And even that, I feel like LLMs have a real strong capacity to even just be everyone's therapist at this point. And actually, you can prompt GPT and like, hey, I have this limiting belief here. Help me like act as a like CBT therapist and coach me through how to work through this. Arguably, you can progress through that pretty quickly without needing to pay a therapist through insurance or 100 to 200 bucks an hour. Um, so that's like another layer. And then I think another layer that comes to mind is another experiment, yet another experiment that I've been running is I've always wanted to learn law because in my mind it's like a first principles in how society works. It is literally the rules that govern our society. So if you know the rules, you know where to bend it or how it can be bent or what are the gray areas. But I mean, I dropped out of school. I don't have a degree. I don't have any formal training in law, but I have ChatGPT. And so I literally got ChatGPT to generate a 4-year curriculum in law. And then I threw it into a project folder in terms of in the instructions. And then I added, hey, here's a 4-year curriculum. Generate a curriculum that is interactive, that is based off of like best learning practices like spaced repetition, and keep stress testing my knowledge. Um, and then that was the instructions. And then in my first chat, I literally just said lesson one and I hit enter. And it just spit a whole bunch of exercises that I could tackle with one specific legal concept. And it basically feels like a video game of I'm just interacting. I'm getting quizzes. It's every single time I get it right, it explains why I got it right or one thing that I'm missing about my answer. And then it closes with, would you like a more challenging like case study or challenging puzzle based off of this with this one little tweak? And I can say yes or no. And if I feel like I want to stress test it more, then I can lean into it. If I say, no, I'm ready for the next one, I can hit lesson two. And even just doing that for 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours over the last month, I already have pretty decent understanding of one specific legal principle. And I'm already seeing ways that I can better protect myself uh, in terms of creating commitments and engagements with people on a casual and professional basis to minimize my legal exposure and also like prevent myself from being taken advantage of. So like that's just 3 to 4 hours of interacting with the GPT. And so given the original question about capacity, like we're in unprecedented times right now to be able to learn anything really quickly in a relatively personalized, engaging way. Um, and we also have tools again to like shore up in the things that hold us back mindset wise, and then like we also have ways to like break through into problem solving that we've never ventured into before, all using all using LLMs. It's crazy right now.
I am in awe of how you use AI, just like all over the place, just integrated into your life in such a way that, yeah, it genuinely adds value.
Okay, here's one more that's kind of a fun one. I built a an Asian Parent GPT because I wanted to create an exposure therapy practice to be better at interacting with my mom, because sometimes my mom says things that really grinds my gears. So I figured rather than wait to interact with my mom, I'll just create a GPT that acts like my mom in a certain way and learn to lean into that discomfort. So that's another example of it. That's kind of fun. That's very, very personalized. You can create a very personalized use case to work through things that you know you have challenges with.
I mean, that's kind of hilarious, but also really, really good. And who doesn't struggle
Yeah,
with
yeah,
parental conversations?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I was looking up the parent project that you did with some friends, just
Mhm.
seeing how you could improve parental relationships through, yeah, shared accountability, um, actually showing up and doing it and being consistent. And that was inspiring. I did, in fact, call my mother today. That's in part thanks to you guys. So,
Nice.
so that's
Win.
great. But I going back to what does limited capacity even mean these days?
Hmm.
I think back on kind of a bit earlier in my career where but still when I was managing other people and someone would come to me with a problem and the first thing I would say, this was before AI. The first thing I would say or before AI was more widely available was have you googled it though? Have you
Yep.
checked?
Yeah, yeah.
And 90% of the time the answer was no. So we would
Agree.
do that
I
together.
used to do that too. Yeah.
Right, right. And so I think there's some inherent traits or things that need to be true in order to have capacity today. Three things kind of came to mind as you were talking. The first is you seem to believe there is a solution. If there's a problem, you believe that there's at least a possibility of a solution. If you're asking chat to help you, then there's that. Then the
Mhm.
second piece, and maybe let me speak for myself here, like believe that you are capable or I am capable of finding the solution.
Correct.
So, not just that it exists, but it exists for me. And then the very last piece, and this really speaks to you teaching yourself law, which is
Hmm.
wild, and I love it, is like be willing to put in the work to access it.
Yes.
And
Hmm.
we don't, not everyone has, I mean, I think everyone has all of these three things as possibilities for them, but people who are kind of rapidly accelerating right now and using the things that are suddenly at our disposal, I think are people who carry those three
Fully
beliefs.
agree. I fully agree. I used to not be that person, so I fully understand what it's like to not be that person and not have those beliefs. So I fully agree with you.
What changed?
So like when I was in high school, I was very fixed mindset. Try something for 3 to 5 minutes, and if I'm not good at it, I give up. And I believe that, okay, I'm just not born with talent. I can't do this. I'm not meant to do this. And I would just stop. Like there's multiple examples of me, like something so trivial. I had a friend that was really good at spinning a basketball on his finger, and you just like be able to spin it forever, and you just like do like throw it up, catch it again, and it would still spin it. And I remember trying it on my own for a few minutes, and I'm like, and then it falls, and I'm like, literally within 5 minutes, I gave up, and I'm like, I can't do this, and so that's where I started. Most of my high school life, I had that perspective about things, and I think our the at least the American education system, maybe most Western education systems, perpetuate that mindset. At least the one that I went through. I don't know what it's like now, but what changed for me was uh, I it was a mix of two things. One, I gave up, and two, I pursued passion. So those two in combination basically led me to a shift in that. In giving up, I was basically resigned to not to be successful, to be okay with not being successful, not being traditionally credentialed, Um, and that was like me dropping out of college. And it was just resigned to the fact that, you know what, I'm maybe not going to amount to anything. And I was like, I don't think I'm not interested in college. I'm just going to be a loser, and that's okay. Because I just want to feel like what I'm doing is meaningful. And I'd rather have that than do all the right things and not feel that. And so, in pursuing the original question that I had with my career, which is how do I wake up feeling fulfilled and feeling like my work means something, in pursuing that and working with the homeless, I started talking to the homeless, even though I had a lot of social anxiety. I was at a point where at that time in high school, I couldn't talk to girls that I didn't already know. I couldn't talk to strangers. I couldn't have old eye contact with strangers. So literally the only people I talked to were people I already knew. But because of the passion and purpose of wanting to work with the homeless, I started talking to homeless people. And I realized that after about 6 months of talking to the homeless, I realized that I had a lot more social confidence just to talk to strangers and make conversation out of nowhere. And it was partially because I had so much positive feedback. Whenever I talked to homeless people, a lot of them would thank me for talking to them, and they would say like, "Oh, you're such a great conversationalist." And I would be really surprised because I I didn't say anything interesting, because at the time the reason why I was not a good conversationalist was because I thought that I had to be funny, I had to say interesting things, and that being a good conversationalist was having interesting things to say. And so, yeah, that challenged my notion of what a good conversationalist was, and it created a positive feedback that, oh, being a good conversationalist is also just being good at asking questions, it's letting other people talk. And so once I got really comfortable with that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really great at answering questions. It doesn't require me to be special or anything. It's just like following curiosity. Like that feels easy. If that's all it takes to be a good conversationalist. Oh my gosh, this is easy. This is great. And so after doing that transformation in like 6 months, I realized that, oh, I have no more social anxiety. And I feel pretty confident talking to strangers. And I just had that reflection of, wait a second, 6 months ago, I never would have done this. 6 months ago, I would have been scared to do this. So it was that realization that in 6 months, I can go from total noob, totally incompetent, to someone that is decently competent. And it became so inescapable and obvious that I'm like, oh, wait, that means that's true about any skill. Like, I can take any skill in my life and be terrible at it, which is most things because I'm a young person, and be decently good in 6 months. Wait a second. Wait, I can learn anything then, as so long that I can focus the effort and do it for 6 months. Wait, that means I can do anything that I want. I can get. Wait, whoa, life could be fun. Wait, that means I'm excited to get old. Wait, what can I do in 10 years then? Whoa, that means if I fast forward 20 years, my life will be really interesting. So that was the journey. That's how I switched from a very, very, very fixed mindset, being very jaded and pessimistic about my life and where I was headed, to realizing that life is so interesting and can be so much more interesting than I thought. And the older that I get, actually, the more fun it gets, so long as I'm willing to consistently invest time and effort to get good at things that I suck at, because that is the mastery curve that literally every human on the planet has to go through.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you and I have briefly kind of touched on Byron Katie's work, which involves taking a thought that's causing suffering and really turning it around and making it so that you ask, is the opposite of this true? Is the flip of this true? In such a way that you don't necessarily have to accept a different thought, but after the worksheets, you're kind of thinking, well, this is not the only possibility. This opinion of mine may not be fact. Maybe it is fact, but it might not be. And I was thinking about that when you were talking about the 6 month transformation, because once you see a thing like that, like learning is possible for me, enjoyable even, I am capable of so much more than I even realized. You can't unsee that. And it's kind of like living in
Mhm.
the matrix a little bit. And I was also thinking about age because, and you mentioned this, just like it's exciting to get older. It's such a, it's such a confrontation or a challenge to this idea that older people are, not advanced with technology, have more of a fixed mindset. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, which I have to admit that I've sometimes, and I've been guilty of imposing on my parents and sometimes fearing for myself. It's not necessarily true. Have you known this since you were a teenager?
I think that saying is still true. It still has a lot of truth in that the average person really isn't proactive about their growth. The average person is not actively, excitedly like learning new skills. That's the path of least resistance is just keep doing what you know and don't get better at things. Don't deliberately put yourself in uncomfortable situations. And yeah, that person's life trajectory is likely gonna lead to old dog, not very excited to learn new tricks. Old dog, resistant to learning new tricks. And so, yeah, I think the saying is true. I think the challenge is that when these sayings get passed around, as a young person, you don't necessarily know who they're talking about, and you don't know that dynamic of like, oh yeah, it's describing this average of a population, but it's not describing everyone like almost like a criminal conviction of like you are forever destined to do this. If you are this age, you will forever be no longer able to learn tricks. And I think as a young person, whenever I heard that, I definitely feared that. I definitely worried that, oh no, am I going to be that person? That sounds terrible. And but I mean, yeah, where I'm at now, I have no qualms as to whether I'm going to be that person or not, because I think it's inevitable at this point where I'm probably going to be that 70-year-old that's leaning into new tech and like hanging out with young people because they share that energy of like enthusiasm. And I'll be still learning a bunch of things likely by that age. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so for me too. um on your LinkedIn, I found it really interesting that what you wanted to share when you've got that intro section, you wanted to share your values. And one of your values is integrity. And that's one of my values too. And what you say is don't take advantage of people, even if you can get away with it. Tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient, and own up to your mistakes, period. Can you share how this made it to your short list of values?
When I was in real estate investments is a very shark infested territory. It's very dog eat dog. Um, in contrast to like nonprofit or social impact, I feel like in nonprofit or social impact, you kind of trust that you know what, if people are here, it's because they actually care. Because like you don't necessarily you don't go to social impact to make money. Like yeah, but it's the exact opposite case in real estate where literally people are there to make money. And there's just I met maybe like 200-300 people in that time, that 4 year span. And I remember being only able to count on one hand the number of people that I would trust with my back in terms of based off a transaction, like a deal that comes up. I would trust to that even if I mess up the paperwork, or if even if there was no paperwork, I would trust that this person would still do the right thing and take care of me. Um, very small amount of people. And not only that, I had been screwed over by people that I worked with on a consistent basis. The world that I worked in, we actually worked with a lot of people who would face foreclosure when the bank is taking back their house. That is a very sensitive and high stakes scenario that most people do not know how to navigate with fluency. But my team was really good at this. We understood this process A through Z. And so that is a very ripe dynamic with information asymmetry for me and us to take advantage of homeowners who are in that situation. And I made it a point to always fully educate them and homeowners around their actual rights and like their options, so that it was I tried to not create a situation in which they felt like they had to work with me because I was the only option that they were aware of. Um, and I did a lot that all in a lot of different ways, and that just feels important because of the number of times that I've been screwed, and that all the times that I've been ignorant, and how easy it is to screw someone over who just doesn't know any better as a young person. And so having been on the experiencing end of that, I'm like, that is a really shitty feeling. That sucks. I just don't want to create more of that. There's already plenty of people creating that. Um, so why would I do the very thing that I hate experiencing? And it's important enough that I label it, because it isn't. I can't take it for granted because I've lived in a world in which it wasn't taken for granted. Um, so yeah, that's those are some of the origins of where it came from.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. I had no idea about that world, but it sounds sounds really unpleasant, and I would much rather be able to sleep at night than
Yeah.
make more money. Thank you for being generous with your time, but also with your wisdom and all the things that you're learning. I think through your newsletters, through, well, this conversation, through the beta testing experience, I think that's something that I've felt consistently is you are trying to support and educate the people that you interact with. And yeah, I'm grateful for that. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm also always looking for guests who enjoy meaningful conversations. If that sounds like you, please send me a message and let me know what you'd like to talk about. I'll get back to you. Thanks for listening.